The twin suns of Velthara rose slowly over the silver plains, painting the sky with shades of gold and violet. The air shimmered with soft light, reflecting off the tall crystal towers of the Thalani Empire. To anyone who visited for the first time, it looked like a dream, a world of beauty and perfection. But beneath the calm surface lay tension. The Thalani were proud, strict, and always at the edge of war. Their ruler, Princess Liraya Thalani, stood on the balcony of the great hall, watching the new day unfold. Her eyes were sharp and bright like molten glass filled with the weight of responsibility. From childhood she had been trained to lead, to fight, and to never show weakness. Her people called her the Iron Daughter. She had led armies, built cities, and carried the burden of her dying empire. But today was not an ordinary day. Today she would meet the strange visitors from a small blue planet far across the stars. Humans. For the Thalani, strength was measured by work and sacrifice. To them, humans were soft and emotional. But the humans had something the Thalani needed: technology that could save their dying planet. The Thalani's resources were fading, and their people were growing restless. Without an alliance, their empire might fall. When the human ship landed, a wave of light spread across the landing field. The craft was nothing like Thalani design, simple, rough, and practical. A group of humans stepped out, wearing gray uniforms marked with blue stripes. Leading them was Captain Aaron Blake, a tall man with calm eyes and a quiet expression. Unlike the proud Thalani warriors, he didn't carry a weapon. He only carried a small device and a translator, and a patient smile. Princess Liraya met him in the Hall of Concord, a room carved from living crystal. She sat on her throne, flanked by her advisors and guards. Aaron approached with respectful steps, bowing slightly. "On behalf of Earth's Federation," he said gently, "I bring greetings and hope for friendship." Liraya studied him closely. His voice was calm, but there was strength in it. His eyes met hers without fear. She admired that. Few had the courage to look directly at her. "You come from a world of emotion," she said coldly. "We come from a world of discipline. What could we ever share?" Aaron smiled softly. "Perhaps we can share what we both lack." The court grew silent. Liraya narrowed her eyes. She had heard that humans spoke in riddles, and she did not like it. But something in his voice kept her from dismissing him. They began to discuss the alliance, the exchange of technology, trade, and defense. Liraya was firm, demanding proof of loyalty. She told Aaron that her people had no time for weakness. "I will work until my hands bleed if that is what it takes to save Velthara," she said with pride. Her voice echoed through the crystal hall. To her surprise, Aaron didn't look impressed. He didn't clap, didn't bow. He only looked at her with a question in his eyes. Then he said, in a tone so gentle it almost sounded like concern, "Can you be a mother?" The hall froze. Even the translators paused, as if unsure how to process the words. Liraya's expression hardened. Her advisors whispered angrily, "Was this an insult? Did this human dare mock her? What do you mean?" she demanded, standing tall. Aaron met her gaze without hesitation. "You said you would work until your hands bleed. That is strength. But can you also heal with those hands? Can you hold a frightened child not as a soldier but as a protector? Can you build a world that doesn't just survive but grows?" The silence deepened. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not even her generals. To the Thalani, such words were strange. Their empire was built on sacrifice, not softness. To care was seen as weakness. Yet for some reason the question stayed in her mind. "Can you be a mother?" Liraya dismissed the meeting early, claiming she needed to consider the proposal. But as she walked through the crystal corridors, her thoughts were heavy. She had faced warlords and traitors, but never a question that pierced so deeply. That night she stood alone in the Garden of Echoes, where glowing flowers swayed under moonlight. Her reflection shimmered on the surface of a shallow pool. She remembered her mother, the late Queen Elenya, who had ruled with both wisdom and warmth. Liraya had always thought her mother was too soft. But the people had loved her more than any warrior king. Perhaps, Liraya thought, there was another kind of strength she had never learned. The next morning she decided to observe the humans more closely. She ordered a small escort and went to the landing camp outside the city, where the humans had built a base. What she found surprised her. The humans worked hard, but not like the Thalani. They laughed, argued, and helped each other freely. Soldiers built shelters beside engineers, and children played among the crates. Everyone seemed connected by invisible threads of care. One scene caught her attention, a human mother kneeling beside her child, showing him how to plant a seed in the soil. The boy laughed as the tiny seed slipped from his fingers. The mother didn't scold him. She smiled and helped him try again. Lyraya stood silently, watching them. The image felt strange, yet peaceful. There was no discipline here, no fear of failure, only patience. Aaron appeared beside her quietly. "They've been planting trees since we landed," he said. "We'll leave them behind when we go. Gifts for the air." Lyraya looked at him with curiosity. Why spend energy on trees when war could come any day? "Because trees don't fight," Aaron said simply. "They grow." His words stayed with her long after he left. She found herself visiting the human camp again, listening to their songs and stories. She noticed how even their weakest members had a place, how every hand, no matter how small, could help. The Thalani were strong, but alone. The humans were fragile, but united. One evening, Aaron invited her to dine with the human crew. The meal was simple: vegetables, bread, and soup. Nothing like the grand feasts of Velthara. But the warmth around the table felt different. People talked, laughed, shared memories. When Lyraya spoke, they listened with real interest, not forced respect. She found herself laughing too, softly at first, then more freely. She couldn't remember the last time she had done that. When the meal ended, Aaron said quietly, "You don't have to work until your hands bleed, princess. You just have to make sure those hands hold something worth protecting." Lyraya looked at her palms, calloused, marked from years of training. She had built walls, led armies, and shaped her people's destiny, but now she wondered, what had she truly protected? That night, as the twin moons rose, she wrote in her private journal, the one no one else was allowed to see. "The human's words confuse me. He speaks not of power, but of care. Can a leader be strong and still gentle? Can one fight and still protect life? Perhaps strength is not only in the blade, but also in the heart." Outside her window, she saw the humans lighting lanterns to mark the night. Their laughter drifted up to the towers, soft and warm. For the first time in many years, Princess Lyraya did not feel like a ruler looking down at lesser beings. She felt like a student watching a lesson unfold. And though she would never admit it aloud, she began to wonder if perhaps, just perhaps, this human from Earth had already begun to change her. Days turned into weeks, and the human presence on Velthara became part of the daily rhythm of the Thalani capital. Though their arrival had once caused whispers and suspicion, now there was quiet curiosity. The humans were different, but not dangerous. They smiled often, worked with steady hands, and spoke with kindness that seemed strange yet comforting. Princess Lyraya Thalani, who had once viewed them as fragile creatures, now found herself drawn to observe them closely. Each morning she would visit their camp, pretending it was to monitor progress on the alliance treaty. But in truth, she wanted to understand the strange people who lived so freely. She noticed how they treated one another, how even the lowest worker was respected, how every small success was celebrated. They had no rigid ranks or harsh punishments. When one failed, another offered help. It was a kind of order built not on fear, but on trust. For the Thalani, this was unheard of. One morning, Lyraya watched as a human engineer, Lieutenant Mara, worked with a group of Thalani apprentices to repair an energy converter. The Thalani boys struggled with the strange human tools. Mara didn't scold them. Instead, she smiled, guiding their hands gently, repeating each instruction until they succeeded. When the converter finally powered up, everyone cheered. The apprentices bowed deeply, but Mara only laughed and said, "No need for that. You did it yourselves." Lyraya turned to Captain Aaron Blake, who stood beside her. "Your people show patience I cannot understand," she said quietly. "In our armies, failure brings shame." Aaron replied, "And does shame make them stronger?" She frowned. "It makes them careful," he nodded. "But fear doesn't build trust, Princess. Trust builds courage." His words echoed in her mind long after he left. That evening, Lyraya joined a meeting between human and Thalani advisors. It was supposed to be a simple discussion about energy trade, but a small disagreement soon turned into argument. The Thalani advisor, Commander Vethran, raised his voice, accusing the humans of hiding their real intentions. Aaron stayed calm, never once shouting. Instead, he said in a firm, respectful tone, "Commander, if we were hiding anything, would we have brought our families here?" Bethran paused, confused. "Families?" Aaron nodded. "Some of our crew members came with their partners and children. They live here now in your city. We trust you with our loved ones. That is proof of our faith." The room went silent. Even Lyraya felt something stir in her heart. To bring one's children to a foreign world, that was not weakness. That was courage of another kind. After the meeting, she asked him, "You speak of trust as if it were a weapon." Aaron smiled. "It is stronger than any weapon, Princess. You'll see." The next day she walked alone through the human settlement again. The sun was setting and the camp was filled with warm colors. Orange light over white tents, the sound of laughter and music. Children played among the engineers, chasing a small robotic bird that fluttered through the air. Lyraya stopped near a group of humans sitting around a fire, listening to one of them play a stringed instrument. The tune was soft and full of emotion. When she asked what it was, Aaron explained, "It's called a lullaby, a song we sing to calm our children." She tilted her head, puzzled. "You use music as comfort?" "Yes," he said. "It tells them they are safe. That someone cares." Lyraya listened quietly. The song's melody seemed to reach deep inside her, touching something she didn't know was there. She thought of her own childhood, cold lessons, strict rules, endless training. No songs, no gentle voices, only the sound of commands. When the song ended, she asked softly, "Do you ever tire of caring for others?" Aaron looked at her for a long moment before answering, "No, because caring gives life meaning." In the following weeks, Lyraya began inviting the human engineers into the city's workshops. They worked beside the Thalani, teaching them new techniques, helping repair old machines, and sharing ideas. For the first time in decades, laughter could be heard inside the mechanical halls. The Thalani workers began to smile more, learning that mistakes were not the end of the world. Slowly, the cold silence of the empire began to melt into warmth. But not everyone approved. Some Thalani nobles believed Lyraya was becoming too close to the humans. They whispered that she had forgotten her people's traditions. One evening, her advisor, Lord Kalen, confronted her. "Princess," he said firmly, "you must remember who we are. The Thalani survive by discipline. These humans will make us weak." Lyraya looked at him with calm eyes. "If kindness is weakness, then perhaps we have been too strong." Kalen frowned. "You speak like them." "Maybe I am learning from them," she replied. He bowed stiffly and left. Lyraya sighed. She knew her people feared change, but something inside her told her that this change was necessary, that her world could no longer survive on hardness alone. One day, a sandstorm swept across the plains outside the city. The human camp was caught in its path. Without hesitation, Lyraya rushed to help with her guards. The winds were fierce and visibility was low. She saw humans struggling to secure their shelters and protect their equipment. But what struck her most was how they protected each other. Soldiers covered children with their own cloaks. Engineers formed a chain to pull one another to safety. No one was left behind. When the storm passed, she found Aaron helping an injured worker, his own hands bruised and covered in dust. He didn't stop to rest. He didn't ask for help. He simply kept working. Lyraya knelt beside him and said softly, "You could command others to do this for you." Aaron shook his head. "A leader doesn't stand above his people, Princess. He stands among them." Those words burned into her memory. She had always been taught that a ruler must be distant, untouchable. But here was a man who led through closeness, not fear, and his people followed him not because they feared him, but because they loved him. She watched as he carried the wounded man to safety, whispering words of comfort. It was then she understood the heart behind his question. Can you be a mother? It wasn't about bearing children. It was about protecting life, with patience, with love, with hope. That night, Lyraya walked to the high balcony of the great hall. The stars stretched endlessly across the black sky. Below, she could see the faint lights of the human camp. She remembered her own words. "I will work until my hands bleed." Once, those words had meant pride, duty, and power. Now they felt hollow. What was work without purpose? What was power without compassion? She thought of the human mother planting seeds with her child. She thought of the workers helping one another in the storm. She thought of Aaron's calm voice asking her if she could be a mother. For the first time in her life, She whispered a truth to herself. Perhaps I do not yet know how to lead. And with that quiet admission came something unexpected. Peace. She didn't feel weaker. She felt free. In the days that followed, Lyraya began to change how she ruled. She ordered new schools to be built, ones that taught not only discipline but creativity. She allowed her soldiers time to rest, time to learn. She opened the royal gardens to the children of workers. At first, the Thalani elite were shocked. But slowly the people began to smile again. Farmers shared food with neighbors, soldiers helped rebuild homes, and laughter returned to the streets. The humans had brought more than technology. They had brought warmth. Aaron noticed the change too. When he met Lyraya again, he said quietly, "You're becoming the leader your people need." Lyraya smiled faintly. "No, I'm becoming the person I should have been all along." And for the first time, the Iron Daughter of Velthara felt her heart truly open. The peaceful days on Velthara did not last long. Far beyond the twin suns, a dark shadow moved across the stars. The Rygath Dominion, a ruthless empire that conquered worlds without mercy. The Thalani had long feared them, and now that fear became real. One morning, the sky burned red as the first Rygath fleet entered orbit. The alarm bells of the Thalani capital echoed through the crystal towers. Soldiers rushed to their stations, energy shields flickered to life, and civilians hid in the lower districts. The humans, though fewer in number, prepared their defenses too. Princess Lyraya Thalani stood on the high balcony of the Great Hall, watching the horizon darken with enemy ships. She had trained her whole life for war, but this time her heart felt different. She no longer fought for pride or power. She fought to protect life, the lives she had just begun to understand. Captain Aaron Blake met her in the command chamber. His uniform was dusty, his eyes steady. "They're not here for a treaty," he said. "They're here to destroy both of us," Lyraya nodded. "Then we fight together." For the first time in history, Thalani soldiers and human troops stood side by side. The humans brought advanced defense drones and compact cannons. The Thalani brought speed, precision, and unmatched discipline. Lyraya commanded the combined forces from the front line, her silver armor shining beneath the rising suns. As the first battle began, the sky filled with fire. Rygath ships rained plasma bolts onto the plains. The ground trembled and towers cracked under the heat. Human and Thalani pilots launched into the air, their fighters darting between the massive enemy cruisers. Aaron's voice came through the comms, calm even amid chaos. "Team Gamma, cover the eastern shield. Don't let them breach the city." Lyraya's ship soared beside his. "Understood," she replied, gripping the controls. No one touches Velthara. For hours the battle raged. The air smelled of smoke and metal. Lyraya's fighter dodged enemy fire, her heart pounding. She had fought many battles before, but this one felt personal. These humans, once strangers, had become part of her people's hope. She would not let them fall. Then came the first tragedy. A Rygath cruiser broke through the upper shield, firing directly into the human camp. Explosions tore through the fields. Lyraya heard Aaron shout through the comm, "Medic teams, get everyone out of the south zone." Without hesitation, she dove her ship straight into the attack path, drawing enemy fire away from the ground. Her craft shook violently. Sparks filled the cockpit. "Princess, pull back," shouted one of her commanders. But she ignored the warning. "Not while they're still down there." She fired 2 energy lances, striking the Rygath ship's wing. It exploded in a burst of blue light, falling toward the plains. The blast sent shockwaves across the battlefield. When the smoke cleared, the sky was momentarily silent. Her pilot team cheered, but Lyraya barely heard them. She was focused on the people below, humans and Thalani helping each other, carrying the wounded to safety. Even in chaos, they showed compassion. That sight gave her strength. By nightfall, the first wave of the Rygath fleet had been pushed back, but the cost was heavy. The city's shields were weakened and many lives were lost. The wounded filled the corridors of the palace. Lyraya walked among them, helping where she could. She knelt beside a young Thalani soldier clutching his arm. "Be still," she said softly, pressing a healing patch against his wound. The soldier looked up in surprise. "Your Highness? You shouldn't be here." Lyraya smiled faintly. "Where else should I be?" Nearby, Aaron was helping the human medics. His uniform was torn, his hands covered in dust and blood, but he didn't stop. When he saw Lyraya, he gave a tired nod. "You fought like a storm out there," he said. And you fought like peace itself, she replied. He chuckled quietly. Peace can fight too when it must. For a brief moment amid the ruins, they shared a silent understanding. That war was not just about victory. It was about protecting the chance for peace. The next morning, the Regath fleet returned. Larger, angrier, deadlier. This time, they aimed for the heart of the city. Their general sent a message across the open channel. Surrender your world or we will burn it to dust. Lyraya stood tall before the hologram display. You may burn our towers, she said, but you will never break our spirit. The Rygath laughed. Then your blood will color the sand. Aaron turned to her. We can't hold the city much longer. We need a plan. Lyraya walked to the center console, her mind sharp. If we can lure them into the valley of Akaris, we can collapse the ridges and trap their ships. But someone must stay behind to trigger the charges. Aaron looked at her, realizing what she meant. That's suicide. Someone must do it, she said quietly. He shook his head. No, not you. Your people need you alive. Lyraya met his gaze. And your people need their captain. For a moment, they stood in silence, two leaders from different worlds, both ready to sacrifice everything. Finally, Aaron said, then we do it together. The plan was set. As the Rygath ships descended into the valley, the combined human Thalani forces retreated strategically, leading the enemy deeper. Explosives were planted along the ridges hidden beneath the rock. Lyraya and Aaron remained in the control tower, waiting for the signal. Outside, the enemy's light filled the valley like a storm of fire. Now, Aaron said. Lyraya pressed the detonator. The mountains erupted. A blinding flash filled the sky as the ridges collapsed inward, trapping the Rygath ships in a storm of falling rock and flame. The ground shook violently, but before they could celebrate, an explosion rocked the control tower. The shockwave threw Aaron across the floor. Captain! Lyraya cried, running to him. He was bleeding from his forehead, struggling to stand. I'm fine, he said weakly. Just help me up. Lyraya helped him, her hands trembling slightly. You're not fine, she muttered. He smiled faintly. Neither are you. Outside, the battlefield was silent except for the crackle of fires. The Rygath fleet was destroyed. Velthera had been saved. For now. When dawn came, the survivors gathered in the city square. Humans and Thalani stood together, their faces covered in ash, but their eyes filled with pride. They had fought as one, not as separate species, but as one people. Lyraya addressed the crowd from the steps of the palace. Her voice was strong but filled with emotion. Today we learned that strength is not only in power or in blood. It is in unity. It is in the hands that heal as much as they fight. The humans taught us this, and together, we will rebuild what we have lost. The people cheered, some with tears in their eyes. Aaron, standing nearby with his arm bandaged, whispered to himself, You've become the mother your world needed. Lyraya turned toward him, hearing his words. And you, she said softly, have become the brother our world never had. That night, when the stars returned to the quiet sky, Lyraya walked through the garden that had survived the battle. Many flowers were burned, but a few still glowed faintly in the darkness. She knelt and touched one of them, a small blue blossom planted by a human child weeks ago. Aaron joined her silently, his steps slow. You saved your people, he said. We saved them, she corrected. Together, he nodded. You fought like a warrior, but you led like a mother. Lyraya smiled faintly. Perhaps that's what I was meant to be. They stood in silence for a long moment, listening to the soft wind that carried the scent of ash and life. Above them, the twin suns began to rise again, casting light over a world scarred but still standing, and for the first time Lyraya felt not pride but peace, the kind that comes when one fights not for glory but for love. The war had ended, but Velthera did not celebrate with loud music or grand parades. The world was quiet. Buildings were broken, streets were scarred, and smoke still rose from the plains. The once bright towers of the Thalani capital now stood cracked but unbroken, like the people themselves. Princess Lyraya Thalani walked through the ruins with slow steps. She wore no armor now, only a simple gray robe. Her once silver armor lay locked in the royal vaults, stained with battle marks she no longer wanted to see. Her people greeted her with respect wherever she went, but she could see exhaustion in their eyes. They had survived the Rygath dominion, Yet the price was heavy. At every corner she saw the results of war: wounded soldiers, broken families, orphaned children. The cries of the hurt filled the city's silence like a sad song. Lyria felt those cries deep in her heart. Once she would have only seen them as part of duty. Now she saw them as her children, every Thelani, every human, every soul who had fought under her command. Beside her walked Captain Aaron Blake, his arm still in a sling. His face was pale but calm, marked with scars that told stories of bravery. He no longer wore the neat uniform of the human fleet, only simple clothes like everyone else. He had chosen to stay on Velthara, even when he could have returned home. "You should rest, Captain," Lyria said as they walked. "You are still healing." Aaron smiled lightly. "You sound like a doctor." "I sound like someone who worries too much," she said softly. "Then you sound human," he replied. They both smiled faintly, but behind that smile was shared pain. The war had changed them both. Weeks passed. Slowly rebuilding began. Humans and Thelani worked side by side again, repairing towers, planting crops, rebuilding the shields. The alliance that had begun as a necessity was now something stronger, a family between worlds. But peace was fragile. Supplies were short and the people grew tired. Many feared the Regath might return. Some Thelani nobles blamed the humans for the damage, whispering that their presence had brought war. Lyria heard those whispers, but she refused to listen to fear. One evening she called for a meeting of her council in the Great Hall. The once shining room was dim now, lit only by flickering energy lamps. Her advisors sat in silence as she entered. Aaron stood beside her as a guest, not a soldier. Lyria began, "Our people are wounded, but we are alive. We must rebuild not only our cities but our hearts." Lord Kalen, the same advisor who had doubted her before, stood and said, "Your Highness, we respect your compassion, but we cannot forget our strength. The humans are kind, yes, but they brought their enemies here. What happens when more come?" A low murmur of agreement filled the room. Lyria's expression stayed calm, but her voice carried quiet power. "The Rygath attacked not because of humans, but because of what we represented: unity. They feared what we could become together." Aaron added, "If we separate now, they win without firing another shot." Kalen frowned. "And if unity weakens us?" Lyria looked around the room, her eyes glowing softly. "Then let it weaken the hardness in our hearts. We cannot build the future with fear. We must build it with trust." The council fell silent. For a long moment only the hum of the lights filled the air. Then slowly, one by one, the advisors bowed. Lyria had won them, not with orders but with truth. Later that night she stood on the palace balcony looking at the stars. The twin moons glowed softly above and the winds carried the scent of ash and new grass. Aaron joined her quietly. His steps were slower now. His shoulders still ached from the explosion during the final battle. "You spoke well today," he said. "You remind me of your mother, wise and brave." Lyria looked up at the sky. "My mother ruled with kindness. I used to think she was weak for it. Now I know she was stronger than I ever was." Aaron nodded. "She would be proud of you." Lyria turned to him. "And what about you, Captain? Do you miss your world?" He smiled softly. "Every day. But I also found something here I never had before." "What is that?" she asked. "A reason to stay," he said simply. For a moment silence stretched between them. The night breeze brushed against them gently. Lyria felt warmth rise in her heart. Not romance, but deep respect, something built through shared pain and courage. The next morning, tragedy struck again. An explosion rocked the eastern quarter of the city. One of the damaged power cores had collapsed. Fires spread through the lower districts. Without hesitation, Lyria rushed there herself, refusing to wait for guards or aides. When she arrived, chaos filled the streets. Smoke darkened the air. Civilians screamed as buildings collapsed. Human engineers and Thelani soldiers worked together to pull survivors from the wreckage. Lyria joined them. Her robe was soon covered in dust and ash, but she didn't care. She lifted heavy beams, carried children, and guided people to safety. Her hands bled from cuts, yet she did not stop. Aaron found her in the middle of the smoke, coughing but still helping. "You shouldn't be here," he shouted over the noise. She turned to him, eyes fierce. "This is exactly where I should be." Together they dragged a group of injured workers to the safe zone. When the fires were finally under control, the sun was setting. Lyria sat on the ground exhausted. Her hands were trembling and bruised, blood running down her palms. Aaron knelt beside her, wrapping her hands with clean cloth. "You've done enough," he said quietly. Lyria looked at her bandaged hands and smiled weakly. "I said once that I would work until my hands bled. I never knew it would mean this." Aaron looked at her gently. "You said it as a warrior. You lived it as a mother." Those words filled her with both pain and peace. For years, she had believed that strength was cold and unfeeling, but now she saw that real strength could cry, could bleed, could hold others close. She finally understood what Aaron had meant that first day. Days passed. The fires were put out and rebuilding continued. But Lyria's hands healed slowly and Aaron's injuries worsened. The doctors told him his body was rejecting the local medicine. He needed earth treatment soon or he might not recover. Lyria visited him in the healing chamber. The room was quiet, filled with soft blue light. Aaron lay on the bed, pale but smiling when he saw her. "You always find time to visit," he said softly. She sat beside him. "Of course. You once stayed on my world when you could have gone home. Now it's my turn to stay with you." He chuckled weakly. "I don't think your council will like their princess sitting by a wounded human all day." She smiled faintly. "Let them talk. They don't understand what you've done for us." Aaron looked at her for a long moment. "You don't need me anymore, princess. You have become everything your people need." Her eyes softened. "Maybe, but I would not be this person without you." He reached for her hand slowly and she held it gently. "Not in romance, but in gratitude. If I don't make it," he said, "promise me you'll keep building. Promise me you'll protect what we started." Lyria squeezed his hand. "I promise, Aaron Blake, I'll work until my hands bleed, and this time I'll do it for life, not duty." Aaron smiled faintly. "Then my work here is done." That night, Lyria returned to the balcony once more. The stars seemed brighter than before, as if watching over her world. She looked at her bandaged hands and whispered, "These hands once built walls. Now they build bridges." She thought of Aaron's question again. "Can you be a mother?" Now she knew the answer. It was yes. Not because she gave birth, but because she cared for her people as a mother would. With endless patience, with strength born from love. As dawn touched the sky with light, she turned toward the city below. Smoke still rose in the distance, but so did hope. Children laughed in the streets again. Workers sang as they built new homes. Velthera was healing, and so was she. Years passed since the war against the Rygath Dominion. Velthara had begun to heal. The once scarred plains were now dotted with new homes, green fields, and shimmering towers rebuilt stronger than before. The people of Velthara, humans and Thalani alike, and they worked together side by side. The bond formed in battle had grown into something stronger: unity, trust, and respect. Princess Lyria Thalani had changed as much as her world. Her armor, once polished and cold, was now replaced by simple robes embroidered with silver threads, a symbol of wisdom and compassion. She no longer ruled through fear or discipline alone. She led by example, showing her people the power of patience, understanding, and love. Humans had become part of Velthara's daily life. They shared knowledge, technology, and culture. Children from both species played together, laughed together, and learned from one another. The city streets were alive with music, laughter, and hope. Yet for all her success, Lyria never forgot the lessons she had learned in the first days after the humans arrived, especially the quiet question that had changed her life. Can you be a mother? Now she understood its meaning fully. It was not only about giving life, it was about protecting it, nurturing it, and guiding it to grow strong and free. One bright morning, Lyria walked through the newly rebuilt royal gardens, now open to all citizens. Children ran between the flowering trees, human and Thalani alike, laughing as robotic birds flitted above. She watched as a small Thalani boy struggled to carry a large watering pot. Without thinking, she knelt and lifted it for him. "Thank you, Princess," the boy said shyly. "You're welcome," she replied with a smile. "You must learn to carry it yourself next time." Nearby, human children were learning to plant seeds under the guidance of a gentle teacher. Lyria watched them carefully, remembering the first human mother she had seen planting seeds with her child. It had seemed so ordinary then, yet now it represented hope, patience, and care, everything a world needed to survive. She turned to see Captain Aaron Blake standing nearby, older now but still strong in presence. His arm had fully healed, but his uniform had been replaced with simple clothes suited for Velthara's warm climate. He smiled when he saw her. "You're busy today," he said lightly. "I have work to do," Lyraya replied. "A mother never rests, Aaron, do you?" He shook his head. "Not when my world is alive like this." They walked together, not as leaders and captains, but as two people who had fought for the same dream. A world worth protecting. The city had changed, but there were still challenges. Some areas were slow to recover. Farmers struggled with new soil conditions. Engineers repaired broken energy grids, and schools were rebuilding after years of war. Lyraya visited each place, speaking to workers, teachers, and children. Her presence brought courage. When she spoke, her people listened, not out of fear but out of trust. She no longer demanded loyalty through power. She inspired it through example. One afternoon, Lyraya found a small human child sitting alone near a broken fountain. The boy looked frightened, holding a torn toy in his hands. "Why are you alone?" she asked softly. I can't find my parents," he whispered. Lyraya knelt beside him, placing her hands gently on his shoulders. "It's okay. I will help you." She led him to a group of medics who quickly reunited him with his family. Watching the reunion, Lyraya felt a quiet satisfaction. This was her strength, not in weapons or battles, but in care. This was motherhood in its truest sense. Aaron stood behind her, observing. "You've learned well," he said quietly. Lyraya looked at him, her eyes warm. "No, you've taught me. You've shown me what it means to fight for life, not just survive." Years of rebuilding passed. The scars of war slowly faded. Velthara became a model of unity and hope, a place where humans and Thalani worked together, loved together, and dreamed together. The once proud, iron-willed princess had become something greater, a guardian, a teacher, a mother to all her people. One day, Lyraya visited a new school built in the heart of the city. Children from both species sat together, learning mathematics, history, and the stories of their shared struggle. She watched as one Thalani girl helped a human boy with a math problem. When he smiled, she smiled back. It reminded Lyraya of the first day she had understood Aaron's question. "Can you be a mother?" Now she knew the answer. Yes, she could. She did every day, in every choice, in every act of care. Aaron joined her in the classroom. "You've built something remarkable," he said. "Not I alone," she replied. "We all did it, humans, Thalani, everyone. We fought, we lost, we healed. Together." He nodded, looking at the children. "And the future will be stronger because of it." As the sun set over the city, painting the sky with gold and crimson, Lyraya and Aaron walked through the central plaza. Citizens filled the streets, celebrating the anniversary of the city's rebuilding. There were music, laughter, and dancing. Everywhere she looked, she saw life thriving. A small Thalani boy ran past her, chasing a human girl, both laughing as they tumbled into a fountain. Lyraya chuckled softly, remembering her own childhood, so full of discipline and fear, yet now replaced with hope and freedom. She turned to Aaron. "Do you think we've done enough?" He looked around, watching the people who had once been strangers, now family. "We've done what we could," he said. "The rest is up to them," Lyraya nodded. "And that is the hardest part, letting life grow without trying to control it." Aaron smiled. "Yes, but you've learned to do it." She looked at her hands, and the hands that had once fought endlessly bled for duty and carried the weight of an empire. Now they were hands that nurtured life. "I worked until my hands bled," she whispered, "but now my heart finally rests." That evening, the twin moons rose, casting silver light across the city. Lyraya climbed to the balcony of the great hall and gazed out at the world she had helped rebuild. Children laughed in the streets below, humans and Thalani alike, a living testament to the power of compassion, unity, and courage. Aaron joined her silently. "Do you ever regret anything?" he asked softly. Lyraya thought for a moment. "Only that I waited so long to understand what mattered. I chased strength without knowing its purpose. Now I see, and strength is meaningless without love," he nodded. "And you have plenty of both." They stood in silence, watching the city glow under the twin moons. No words were needed. Velthara was alive, and its people were thriving. At that moment, Lyraya realized something profound. Leadership was not about orders or victories. It was about protection, care, and the courage to build a future that others could call their own. And she had learned that lesson from humans. love, and shared struggle. Years later, travelers would tell stories of Lyraya the Guardian, the princess who fought, bled, and nurtured her world. She would be remembered not only as a warrior, but as a mother to all life on Velthara. She would visit schools, gardens, and workshops, teaching the next generation that true strength was not in conquering others, but in lifting them. Children would call her Mother of Worlds, and she would smile gently, knowing that her promise had been kept. "I'll work until my hands bleed," she would say, "and I will. But now it is for life, for love, and for the future." Above Velthara, the twin suns rose again, golden and bright. Below them, a city rebuilt from ashes, a people united, and a princess who had finally found peace. The lesson was clear. Strength is not in endurance alone. Strength is in love, care, and the courage to protect what matters most. And in the quiet of that new dawn, Princess Lyraya smiled. For she had finally answered the question that had begun it all. Yes, I can be a mother.